The Supreme Court will decide whether Tennessee can ban transgender surgeries for minors, possibly setting a national precedent. A California House race removes any cushion for the House Republican majority 1 month after Election Day. And a Yale University psychologist advises liberals to leave their Trump-supporting relatives out in the cold this Christmas. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Thursday, December 5th. Rather than going quietly into that good night, the Biden administration has decided to spend its last days preserving sex change surgeries for kids. Now, the Supreme Court has spent the week presiding over the United States versus Scrimeti, which could possibly overturn Tennessee's ban on so-called gender-affirming care for minors. Joining me now to discuss is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Josh Hammer. He's a senior editor-at-large for Newsweek and the host of The Josh Hammer Show. So, Josh, does the Biden administration actually have grounds right now to intervene in a state policy like this?
Great question. In fact, this is actually a question that I was discussing just the other day with multiple former U.S. Supreme Court clerks themselves. It's actually not entirely clear to me how the Department of Justice was actually able to file a writ for certiorari, in the first place here. That's the writ, obviously, that seeks the discretionary review of the United States Supreme Court. It's the so-called rule of four, where you need 4 of the 9 justices to agree to hear a case. I actually have no idea, Jill. I frankly don't understand myself why the United States was able to intervene in this particular case there. Now, it is worth noting that they did grant additional oral argument time, as I think the whole world saw, to the transgender attorney for the ACLU, Chase Strangio, if I'm pronouncing his/hers last name correctly there. But nonetheless, this case is styled U.S. versus Scrimeti, which means that the United States is the lead plaintiff here. And that actually has a very concrete, practical application when it comes to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Pam Bondi, assuming that she's going to be the AG pick come January 20th. Namely, they can move to withdraw this case, and specifically, they should make a motion to what is known in legalese to dig it, D-I-G, which means in SCOTUS nomenclature to dismiss it as improvidently granted. Now, it's actually an interesting question when you have a motion to dig a case after oral argument has already been granted. We've been here before. Sometimes they'll dismiss it. Sometimes they will not dismiss it, and the reason why they might not do so in this particular case is, again, because you had the ACLU attorney there who gave argument. It wasn't just the Solicitor General of the United States, Liz Prelogar, there. But it's a somewhat arcane procedural dispute that the justice will actually have to have. At a bare minimum, I think you probably should go ahead and make that filing, because there's no reason why the United States should be in the procedural posture of suing Tennessee for a commonsensical, civilizationally sound law, the likes of which we have here in place from the good people of the state of Tennessee. I guess the good news, Jill, is that either way, even if the Trump-Vance administration moves to so-called dig this case and that motion is denied, then we're likely still looking at a good outcome. I was pretty happy with the way this argument went. It could have gone a little better, but I was overall pretty happy with it. So I think we're looking at a good result here in all likelihood either way, I think.
Let me just step aside from the legal argument and just think about what they're saying in terms of the facts. Because it really is astounding how these people, let's put it this way. It's astounding the discrepancy between the two sides. On the one side, you have someone saying, the ACLU lawyer, claiming that less than 1% of minors who undergo this surgery have regrets. And then you have Tennessee and the Attorney General saying, no, actually 85% desist from transition. Do you have any thoughts about that? It seems like you really do have two sides talking in completely different universes at this point.
Well, Matt, there's a reason for that. That's because what you saw at SCOTUS on Wednesday, I think, are two diametrically opposed conceptions of the human person. You saw two diametrically opposed conceptions of anthropology, of what it means to be human in the first place. On the one hand, you have the ACLU left-wing argument, which is that human life is basically a pick-your-own adventure where you flip through a different page to kind of choose your sex, and you can change your identity. You can grow some facial hair. Maybe you chop off your appendage down below, and then you can identify something else there. On the other hand, you have the old-fashioned view, the view of Genesis 1:27, male and female, God created them, which you don't even need the Bible. You could basically just need good old-fashioned common sense. That's the way it works. I mean, we literally have XX and we have XY chromosomal structure there. The point, though, Matt, and I think that you of all people will appreciate this, is that you have to choose. You have to come down on the side of one of these views of the human person. Neutrality here is just not an option. You cannot just toss it out and say there, okay, it's up to every parent to decide, what view of the human person you want his or her child to be there, whether or not Sally can become Sam or vice versa there. No, you actually have to put a thumb on the scale from both a political perspective and indeed from a judicial and a jurisprudential perspective here. At some point, you actually have to say that the moral heart of the issue in this particular case dictates that there is male and female, and that we are not going to arbitrarily concoct some sort of pseudo classification based on alleged quote-unquote transgender status, the likes of which would get heightened scrutiny in this fabricated, manufactured tiers of scrutiny nonsense that leftist lawyers have created when it comes to 14th Amendment analysis there. But Matt, you have to choose, because as you and I both know, my friend, the only way out is through. And that is the task right now before these justices. Again, I'm optimistic that they will get it right. I am hopeful that in the majority opinion, or at least in one of the concurrences there, that we will get some morally forthright language, the likes of which I've just described.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is a civilizational issue, and it's an issue that strikes at the heart of really whether you can be citizens with people who disagree about this. And I don't say that lightly. How you can be part of one political entity when you disagree on this is really, it can't happen. It won't last over time.
Yeah, and on that note, Ketanji Brown Jackson, a justice during the oral arguments yesterday, was actually trying to compare transgender surgeries to interracial marriages. Watch this.
The question was whether it was discriminatory because it applied to both races and it wasn't, necessarily invidious or whatever. But, as I read the statute here, the case here, the court starts off by saying that Virginia is now one of 16 states which prohibit and punish marriages on the basis of racial classifications. And when you look at the structure of that law, it looks in terms of, you can't do something that is inconsistent with your own characteristics. It's sort of the same thing. So it's interesting to me that we now have this different argument, and I wonder whether Virginia could have gotten away with what they did here by just making a classification argument the way that Tennessee is in this case.
Josh, I listen to that and I say, you know what, I'm going to need a legal brain to help out and try and to decipher what the argument that she's trying to make here.
Well, she's very clumsily, I think clumsily is actually a very charitable way of putting it. I mean, she's very clumsily trying to analogize Tennessee's prophylactic law protecting vulnerable youth from the predations of gender ideology to the old anti-miscegenation laws that pervaded and proliferated in the Jim Crow South prior to the Loving versus Virginia case of 1967, which dealt a final blow to these Jim Crow era bans on interracial marriage. I mean, I think a less charitable way of trying to analyze what Ketanji Brown Jackson has told us is that this is just rank sophistry. I mean, you know what this reminds me of, actually? I mean, this reminds me a lot of Sonia Sotomayor, a fellow dim-witted hack on the U.S. Supreme Court. It was during the oral argument in the Dobbs abortion case, the case that overturned Roe versus Wade. And Sotomayor is asking a question of Scott Stewart, who is the Solicitor General for Mississippi, who was ultimately the successful lawyer who overturned Roe versus Wade, God bless him. And Sotomayor literally asked a question that, you would be forgiven for thinking that like a drunk 18-year-old in his college freshman dorm would have asked, which is that she goes, counselor, but like, how can we actually know when human life begins? Oh yeah, because no one's really thought of that one before, right? I mean, I that's literally what I thought of, Jill, when I saw this exchange with KBJ. And I guess, the bottom line conclusion that I have here is let's not forget how Ketanji Brown Jackson was picked for the court. She was picked when Joe Biden explicitly said, upon Stephen Breyer announcing his retirement, he explicitly said, I am going to choose a black woman. Well, guess what percentage of the national lawyer pool are actually black women? 2%. So when you announce from the get-go that you are excluding 98% of the possible lawyers for one of the 9 most important lawyer jobs in the country, apparently this is what you get.
Well, the good news is now with the Trump administration coming back, DEI will be a thing of the past, it looks like. Josh, thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure, guys. Thank you.
MP, I saw your smile when he was talking about dim-witted injustices in the same sentence there.
I mean, you have to. I mean, Josh is right, and the thing is, people just need to say this out loud. It's people should be embarrassed. We need to embarrass more people in this country. Anyone who considers themselves a member of elite society, who is okay with putting these people on the court, and who's okay with this kind of idiocy, just out in public, they should be embarrassed of themselves. We need to shame people more because it's outrageous. And it's dumb, but it's not something that's ultimately laughable. I was laughing a minute ago at some of Josh's choice words, but it's not ultimately laughable. It's ultimately shameful and reflects on this country in a terrible way. And anyone responsible for it needs to be embarrassed, and we need to call them out on it.
When we come back, we're going to shame the old people of your tribe in California, the House race that slimmed down the Republican majority. We'll talk about it just ahead. Well, here we are now after the presidential election. It might feel like it's a moment to breathe, but this is no time to let our guard down because the forces that are trying to stop the truth, they haven't stopped. If anything, right now, they're doubling down, which means that we need to stand firm and push harder and ensure that the truth has a voice, and our independent platform is your ally in this fight. We're offering fearless political analysis, real stories, and a healthy dose of camaraderie to keep us grounded. But we cannot do it alone. We need you to join in this battle with us because together we can push back against the lies and champion the principles that make America great. So if you haven't already joined us, now is the time. Become a Blaze TV member today and gain access to the arsenal of truth that we've built for you. It's your home and your family and the front lines right now for the ongoing fight for freedom and integrity. And our next chapter starts right now. So go to blazetv.com/Jill and get $30 off. If you love the show and you support Blaze TV and what it stands for, this is your chance to get more involved. It's blazetv.com/Jill for $30 off. The election was a month ago, and yet the dust is still settling. Democrats managed to flip a California House seat last week, narrowing the GOP's slim majority even more. Democratic challenger Derek Tran beat the Republican representative Michelle Steele by fewer than 600 votes. Here to break this down for us is Tom Sauer. He's the CEO and founding director of the MacArthur Group. So, Tom, let's dive into these races. How pivotal were these for the GOP that we had to go out there and wait, though, on the state of California?
It's wild, you guys. Thanks for having me, by the way. I think right now we've got, 214 to 220 seats now or something like, or some very, very slim margin. And these Orange County races should have been layups, really, even in tight ones, especially given that this was the best environment for Republicans, especially in Orange County. So I live in Newport Beach. I'm politically active around here. Got a lot of friends in the space. I host fundraisers. I'm friends with folks who host fundraisers, and we pay pretty close attention. And look, everyone likes to talk about California, but Orange County is a bright red dot, generally speaking, in a blue ocean. And I look at some of these races. So, for example, the Michelle Steele race, crazy. I mean, in 2022, she won by like 10,000 votes. And now you're thinking, and this time looks like she lost by a few hundred. And always it's like this last minute counting that always seems to only go in one direction. It's a little fishy, but look, I have no evidence. I can't point to anything. But I would say that for the Michelle Steele race and some of the other races here, such as Scott Baugh in my district, Matt Gunderson in 49, a little bit further south of us, is one of the big issues that I believe is that they really should have ran harder on issues that people really care about, and that's going to be crime. Now, maybe a campaign consultant might say something like, well, that's a local issue. But the problem is you are running as a local representative, and all politics gets local. And even if a congressman might not have a direct role in influencing what happens locally when it comes to crime, that's what people care about. For example, Prop 36, which is a massive anti-crime law, essentially making crime illegal again in California, passed by like 70%, right? And then another great example is our district attorney here in Orange County, Todd Spitzer, great guy, by the way. And he takes no BS, right? What did he run on? No LA and OC, right? It should be a no-brainer to me. And instead, I saw a lot of campaign signs that just had generic names, didn't even say Republican or Democrat, just lawn signs with a name, didn't have a slogan like, no LA and OC. You can steal that from Todd Spitzer. I don't think he'd mind. And that was why I think one of the big issues. I felt that the campaigns, generally speaking, came from a little bit of a place of almost learned helplessness, being a Republican California. Locally, we were really successful, though, like in terms of like county seats, board of supervisors, really well. But when it came to these congressional candidates, it was just the generic Republican fluff of lower taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So that was one of the big issues that I saw, my friends saw, and frankly, there are a lot of people I know, especially people who wrote checks, that are really mad.
Tom, I want to we do want to get back around to the ridiculous way in which the votes are counted. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's embarrassing to the whole country at this point, right? Just to what's the final vote? But yeah, so we'll get back to that. But I think what your point is really important. Your point is that, look, potentially Republicans could have won with or without some shady business going on, but they didn't because of really what comes down to the message from the candidates and the campaigns they ran. And this is astounding to me. We need to drill into why this is happening still in the year of our Lord 2024 in California. And you're taking me back to my California days, mentioning names and people that I've met and been around. Here's the problem. Let me put it this way. Trump, from the very beginning, has attracted people on the right who are very belligerent about the state of the country and the state of the party. And they were drawn to Trump. Like a lot of Claremont people like myself, right? Michael Anton writes Flight 93 essay, right? People from California, Victor Davis Hanson from California. They're the ones, just like when I moved out to Texas, who are saying, you don't know what's back there. You don't know what's coming. You have no idea how bad this is. And they're the ones who are drawn to Trump, right? So if you're in California or on the right, you know how bad it is. And a lot of the wellspring of support nationally, at least intellectually, comes from California. Yet, and I say this with love, for years I've seen this in Orange County. I say it with all love and respect to all of our friends in Orange County, other Republicans there. I have no idea what these people are thinking, because it seems like they live in a different universe, or there's some kind of state of denial or something, and you're still running on, lower taxes like 1985 in Southern California right now. I think there's some other things going on. So what is your best guess as to why we're still not getting it in Southern California? It boggles my mind. It really angers me,
I'm in violent agreement with you, Matt. And I can tell you that in Orange County, because also not only is this probably a very bright red area of California, it is also a very affluent area, right? And so most of the people that live here, particularly the donors, right, they are by and large insulated from many of the problems you see in the rest of in urban areas such as Los Angeles, San Francisco, Stockton, Sacramento. You're largely insulated from that. So for many of the people who are in charge, so to speak, of the Republican Party, it doesn't quite ring true, although it should. Now, and this is something that we've harped on so many times. For example, we had, when I hosted a fundraiser for one of the congressional candidates here, I had our mutual friend, Mike Cernovich, also here. And he's sitting in the dining room. A lot of the people who were in the living room, didn't really know who Mike was or anything like that. And he's texting me like questions and it was also that it came into the point where it's like, God, some of these guys just don't get it. And what makes people angry and fired up when 40% of Americans nationwide say that they don't feel comfortable walking alone outside of their own home at night, that says something. Now, that might not be the case here where I live in beautiful Corona del Mar in Newport Beach. I understand that. but also I understand that other people live in other parts of this state too. And I think going on the general like Mitt Romney Republican, vibe, I just don't think it worked. It just didn't resonate. And had they simply gone on the, hey, no crime in OC, or no LA in OC, stop with the crime. I mean, that would have made a huge difference. And you can tell, you can prove it. Just look at Prop 36. And Scott Ball, Michelle Steele, Matt Gunderson could have ran and just hammered home all day long on TV and web ads saying, my opponent, Tran and Min, and who's the other guy? I can't remember the other guy's name, the other Democrat. They all opposed Prop 36. Mm. Prop 36 won by 70%. Right. When you get Californians to agree by 70% on anything that's remotely law and order conservative, it's bonkers. So I think that there needs to be, and I think there is right now. I mean, I just came 2 nights ago as a large event comprised of many donors, Christmas party, and there are people that were spitting mad about this, and I think people are starting to come around. It was, not to invoke Reagan, but it's like, bold colors, not pale pastels, right? I think if we did that and stood out and not run such milquetoast campaigns, that's just kind of what it came down to.
Yeah, that's good to hear that people are pissed off. That's the first step. That's the first step. Real quick, do you think that, say in Texas, you'll see in Texas, some of it is peer related, right? I mean, you feel bad because your peer group might say, that's a little out there. But they certainly can't be afraid of what the left thinks at this point in Orange County. I mean, it is kind of a club of donors who, they're not on the left. Yeah. So is that playing a part too? Like, I just don't know, like, what is the obstacle? I mean, someone's going to call you names. I mean, it really does. Is it ignorance? Is there a peer related aspect to it?
I think there's a sense of learned helplessness that so many California Republicans have in general. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think about like in the state assembly and the state Senate, I think even now, today, after all this, I think there's still a Democrat supermajority. So, I mean, even if, let's say we did get, a Republican to, become the governor of California, like 20 years ago we did with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and say what you want about it, but the thing is, he knew he couldn't do anything. Right? Because he just couldn't accomplish anything because there's a Democrat supermajority. And I think after a while, there is just this sense of, that it's just a sense of learned helplessness. And so many people on the right, I would say, and there are still a number of donors and activists in California who are Republicans who, in my opinion, still kind of hold on to a boomer mindset, especially here in California, and they define themselves as, we need to stop the radical left or something like that. It's just they define themselves by slowing down progressivism, and that's the best you can hope for. Where where California conservatism is really just progressivism driving the speed limit, to invoke Michael Malice, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing I think about that it really comes down to. I think this has been a wake-up call because there was never, I mean, probably in a generation, you wouldn't have had a better environment than this year to win. And I think that I think many of the California Republicans here, especially in Orange County, were sticking to an old playbook, and which they're used to losing. And they didn't always listen to some of the advice that many of us gave. They kind of thought they knew better than we did. And well, we see how that turned out.
Well, Tom, we wish you the best of luck out there because you might need it. And you can invoke Reagan on this show anytime. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it. Good seeing you again.
Matthew, it's funny just to listen to him because it's a lot of the conversations that we have here. It's just, it's don't California, my Texas now is what we are concerned about here at the moment. Yeah, well, this is, don't Orange County, my Texas. Texas is already sort of Orange County because there's a lot of establishment leaders in Texas who are pretty much like the people he's talking about in Orange County. And again, like some of these are the best people, but this learning, if they can learn from this, I think it's so important what Tom is saying, because if they can learn from guys like him, like, hey, maybe there's another path here and you just got your, handed to you and you didn't need to,
and people are angry, that's a great sign, because if they start turning to a message that is not like looking to be moderate, it's just actually has a positive agenda and saying, no, we're not doing that crap anymore, people will gravitate towards them, and there's no reason why these seats can't be Republican right now. So the thing is, they frame the issue as, oh, we have to be moderate in order to win. It's like, no, your version of moderate is going to make you lose. And once you realize that, like, it's just a matter of self-interest. Like, you can continue being a loser, or you can listen to Tom and you can win.
And when you have an issue that you're winning on 70%, lean into it more, you guys. Don't go anywhere, because when we come back, our next guest is going to prepare you for political disagreements at your family Christmas coming up.
There is a push, I think just a societal norm, that if somebody is your family, that they are entitled to your time. And I think the answer is absolutely not. So if you are going into a situation where you have family members, where you have close friends who you know have voted in ways that are against you, like what you said, against your livelihood, and it's completely fine to not be around those people and to tell them why.
Merry Christmas from MSNBC there. Cancel culture isn't just hitting headlines, it's hitting our Christmas dinner tables as well. And political disagreements are no longer just debates, they're breaking up families. And this holiday season, more people than ever are being encouraged to cut ties with loved ones over differing political beliefs. So are we losing the art of agreeing to disagree? And how do we stop politics from ruining the most wonderful time of the year? Delano Squires, he's a Heritage Foundation Research Fellow and Blaze News contributor. He wrote a piece about this for theblaze.com and joins us now. So Delano, I mean, how should families approach politics this holiday season?
I mean, some families may want to discuss politics. This past Thanksgiving, I was in Texas and Louisiana. You know, my in-laws, it never came up. I don't know if they voted for President Trump. If I had to put my money on it, I'd say they probably didn't. But we love each other, right? And we're not going to break up our family over politicians, and certainly not over politicians who are willing to shake hands and, you know, fulfill the norms that have come to be associated with the office of president. So I think the liberals and leftists and progressives who tell people to cut off family members, to cancel Thanksgiving, to cancel Christmas over the election are crazy, quite frankly. And I think it's just another example of how leftism is fundamentally anti-family. And I think a lot of that traces back to, you know, its roots in Marxism.
Delano, you talk about, you know, the decline of religious belief in America. And as that goes down, you note that this kind of stuff isn't going anywhere. People aren't less passionate in their political beliefs. Talk about that a little bit, because I think it's a very interesting point. I mean, you could say, well, you know, we got rid of bad old religion, and so, you know, that caused all the wars and all the problems in the world, as I've heard from, you know, supposedly atheist educated people for a long time. And yet here we are. So how do you sort this out?
I mean, I'm not a religious scholar. I didn't go to seminary. I'm a simple layman, right? But I'm somewhat familiar with my Bible. And I'm very familiar with human nature, and I think people are hardwired to worship something, and either that will be the true and living God, it will be some other God, some other faith practice, it will be science, it will be their own mind, but somebody is always going to put their faith in something. And I think the role that religion used to play in shaping our worldview and giving us sort of a set of you know, moral principles, a moral foundation, giving us a sense of identity, those things are sort of greatly dissipated because, as I said in the piece, about 30% of Americans are religious nuns, right? So they don't identify with any religion. But that doesn't mean that that impulse has gone away. It's similar, if I could make this analogy, to people who will say, okay, you know, fertility rates have dropped. Men and women are waiting longer to get married. Women are having fewer children, if any at all. But the impulse towards motherhood doesn't always go away, and oftentimes doesn't go away. So that's why you'll hear women say, "Oh, I'm a dog mom." You ask them, "Well, do you have any kids?" "No, but I have 3 dogs." Right? And in the same way, the religious impulse doesn't go away. It just gets projected onto something else. And I would argue particularly for people on the left. It's not exclusive to the left because this really is a bipartisan problem. Um, our religious longings are projected onto partisan politics. And I think that's one of the reasons why our political culture is as sort of morally corrupted as it's become.
Well, yeah, the days are getting closer to the Christmas dinner table. So we are going to have to talk with our families, Delano. It's going to happen. Do you have any tips out there for sensitive topics or even just strengthening the family unit as we all come together over this holiday season?
Well, my first tip would be just to concentrate on the people in the room, right? They're the world has enough, life has enough troubles on its own, right? You don't have to take on the emotional baggage of a campaign or of a political party or your favorite politician. So I just think focusing on the people in your life, right? If you have parents, if your parents are alive and they're aging, or grandparents, just focus on spending time with them, enjoying that time, sitting together, eating, discussing memories, old stories. If you have a new baby in the family, spend time holding that child, playing with that child, right? So there'll be plenty of time to talk about politics. But I think if you allow it to subsume your life and to take over everything in your world, the clothes you buy, the food you eat, the sports teams you root for, the technology if politics is in everything, then I think that's a good sign that it's become an idol in your life. And I think all idols, false gods, need to be smashed. And the holidays are a great time to start doing that.
Yeah, louder for the people in the back, Delano Squires. Thanks so much for joining us. Always love having you on.
Thank you, guys.
Matthew,
Likewise.
it's always refreshing to hear Delano come on because he always has some of the most interesting takes, and he's always so level-headed.
Yeah, he brings some clarity to many things, and I think it's interesting. Like the idea that you would focus on the people should not be,
A novel concept.
should not be something we have to say, but yet we do have to say it. You focus on people because they're in your family and you're sort of given them. So you're given to love them and take care of them regardless. Now, I do think a sign of health is like, if you can't argue about religion and politics, like what else can you argue about? I mean, I think there's no problem with talking about that in a healthy
Clearly,
society.
you would think of course it's going to be okay at your dinner table.
Yeah, well, yeah, at our dinner table, it will be fine, but I think that that obviously is downstream from what you want to do, which is take care of the people around you.
Yeah. Do you have any Christmas traditions in your family that you guys are going out there and you do every year?
I mean, it's pretty normal stuff. We get our tree. I just treasure the time with just my family. I think that's great when you have your own family and you're just there together. But there's nothing I would, we certainly don't shy away from arguing about religion and politics. But to be fair, that's because there's some fundamental agreements and there's disagreements within that. And those disagreements can be fierce. To me, that can be kind of fun in both my wife's family and in my family.
Yeah, it's like, how based are you disagreements? Over there at the Marsden, or at the Peterson household, I should say. We have Matthew Marsden coming on the show next because he's going to break down Marvel's latest blockbuster that may be the last nail in the coffin. Stay tuned. Captain America: Brave New World has no shortages of production issues, including reshoots, rewrites, and negative reviews from test screenings. But could Trump's win be a part of what triggered a reshoot? Despite all of this chaos, Marvel still released a trailer 3 weeks ago. Take a look.
Your inner circle's been compromised. Let me fix it.
Watch yourself. You're not Steve Rogers.
You're right.
I'm not.
Here to break this down for us is actor and producer Matthew Marsden. So, Matthew, I mean, when you look at all of the production issues plaguing the film, where do we even start?
Well, I mean, you have to start at the very beginning, which is actually the whole premise of the role of Captain America going to the Falcon. I think that was an error from the very beginning, although, and for the nerds out there will understand this, that it is one of the comic book characters that actually Sam ends up being Captain America. But I think that most people would look back now and say that they think that it should have gone to Bucky Barnes, who was the Winter Soldier. He comes from the same era as Steve Rogers, and I think that would have been more of a natural progression. But unfortunately, as we know, Disney woke, Star Wars, Disney woke, Marvel. Everyone's looking at the decisions that they make skeptically right now, and of course, you know, having a black character come in and replacing a white character, whether you like it or not, that's a very negative thing just to start off with. So, and you're also casting someone. By the way, I love Anthony Mackie. I think he's a terrific actor. He's great in everything that he does. He's very, very charming. He's like I say, in all the Avengers movies, he's terrific. But you're from the very beginning, woke Disney have been setting this franchise up for failure.
It's crazy that, you know, something was so successful, you know, not even that long ago, though it feels like, to be honest, it feels like it was a long time ago when Marvel was actually interesting and I was okay with bringing my kids to the movies and excited for them and I'd watch them. But it's something that's so large was so fundamentally destroyed. And now I think we people like us acknowledge that. We think it's the case. Certainly you see it, evidence at the box office. But do we think there is a turning back? I mean, Critical Drinker, others were talking about it, Blaze News, some of these articles were talking about maybe because Trump winning, they're going, oh, we need to reshuffle the deck. We need to get this right. And they're backing away from the wokeness.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, like I said, you have to look at their track record and what they've been doing. So it just depends. It's still like degrees of how woke it is. Mm-hmm. And they might have, I mean, they certainly did it in the ill-fated TV show that they had, Falcon and Winter Soldier. I think that they had that very, very famous scene where he's like, and you need to do better, Senator. It's just terrible, terrible writing. So I'm sure maybe it's the reality check that the woke need, because at the end of the day, the whole woke movement is rooted in narcissism, right? So when you look at something like an election, which is a rejection of what they believe in, you'd like to think that they would have some self-reflection, but they haven't on other things. I think that the test screenings, I mean, the fact that they've redone it and then they've put it out to the test screenings and the test screenings have come back bad means that they didn't deal with the issue at the source and they're going back. Look, the whole thing about this film is it's going to cost north of $400 million. I mean, they've basically reshot the movie. The whole movie. They would have been better off just saying, you know what, like they did with Blade, we're going to memory hole it, like forget it, it's not moving forward, let's restart again. But again,
it's a very expensive memory hole.
It's a very, but they cannot make the money back on this.
No, but the problem is it says that it wrapped up filming in June of 2023 when we were in a very different political environment. And if you're on the left and you're a Hollywood movie studio, you're going, well, we don't need to redo any. This is who the people of America are. They had no idea that a reckoning was going to come and that Donald Trump was going to go into office. Now, my issue, though, that I have with this is it's Captain America, Brave New World. All of the movies that we're seeing, Marsden, none of them are brave. And none of them are new. This is another Captain America that we are getting, another one in the series. We just keep seeing the same movies being made over and over and over again. Even at $400 million, they can't even get like a good idea out there that's new and thought-provoking at this point.
Well, what they've done is through the DEI hiring practices, they've just hired people based on their immutable characteristics, right? So they're not bringing anyone in that actually has any talent. So what you have then is when you're going to the well and you're saying, let's do something new, what do? Because they don't have an original thought in their brain. They go back to the established in the past that was a success, right? So they keep going back to that well, which is what you're saying is they're not bringing anything out that's new or brave at all. And in fact, Hollywood, when you get to the point where you're spending $200-300 million, I understand that you need a certain amount of things. Like, for example, you need to go back and say, well, this is established IP. Captain America, they've had, which is probably the best of those superhero movies, if you're looking at the individual characters, aside from the Avengers, it's probably the best one. It's certainly better than Iron Man 2 and 3, right? I mean, if you look at, like I said, Winter Soldier is probably the best one of those films. So what they're saying is to save their own jobs, right? Because they don't really have that creative spark and they haven't earned it. They haven't come up the ranks. So what they're doing is they're looking, getting IP. Then what do you do next? You go for the stars. Well, apparently they went for Mark Ruffalo, and he didn't want to come back. Apparently, they went for Chris Evans, and he didn't want to come back. So now, who are you going to go to? You're going to go to Harrison Ford and Anthony Mackie. Those aren't. Harrison Ford maybe 30 years ago was big enough to open a movie like that, as we've seen from The Dial of Destiny, which was terrible. He's not even someone that you'd look at to say, well, this is going to be a quality movie, as he was back in the day when he came out with Indiana Jones. So when the producers are putting they're kind of like lumping these movies together with what they feel is going to be a winning concoction, it just isn't anymore. And they're failing on multiple different levels. It's not just one level. It's not just the writing. It's the producing. It's the directing. It's all these different things that are causing this project to fail.
Yeah, not a brave new world, cowardly old crap. And then when you look at how they're moving, though, I think what's interesting about it is it shows it's sort of a morality tale, right? I mean, once you start to say, no, we're going to put our politics into the movie, now all of a sudden you have to walk it back and pay attention to what's going on, because the rumors are, right, the assassination attempt happened, never mind the victory. Then all of a sudden they realize half the country is going to be watching this with a critical eye. And they wouldn't be in this situation at all if they had been focused on actually providing quality entertainment in the first place. And now it's like, how many movies are going to be like this? They're going to have to be watching what's going on in the news and then changing the plot. I mean, it seems like they did this to themselves. I can't feel sorry for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I was in Hollywood for 20 years, so I know what those rooms are like. And it is this kind of echo chamber. And while you're having successes, even if you look through the Avengers movies, they started putting in their little agendas and people will be like, okay, I've got enough goodwill. There's enough goodwill to go and watch the movie. And now America has turned a corner with the Trump election, and they're saying, you know what, woke is over. I'm not going to, even in my own personal life and in our own personal lives, people online are saying, I'm done with the woke. You're not going to make me bend the knee anymore. So I think it's part of the pendulum swing back, which is kind of crystallized in the election of Donald Trump. So, but do I think that they'll learn their lesson? No.
No, of course they're not going to. Marsden, I don't know if we're going to have you back on before Christmas. So I want to know, is there any movie that you watch every Christmas with your family, or something that you guys have to see every year?
Well, that's a great question. For the longest time, people give me a lot of hassle because I never saw It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, my
I hadn't seen It's a Wonderful Life till literally 2 years ago. So that's the movie.
There you go. Welcome to the club.
And Die Hard. And it is a Christmas movie. I'm just saying it is. It's a Christmas movie.
Well, thanks for stopping by. And you know what? Add Die Hard to the Christmas list. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back to wrap up the show right after this. Well, it's 20 days away from Christmas, and Matthew, I haven't really been in a huge Christmas spirit, but I feel like today is the day that it's kind of taking over my life at this point. And I'm just looking at the different Christmas traditions that everybody has. And I love just talking, with Delano about it and Matthew Marsden a little bit, and, just trying to figure out what everybody has going on with their different Christmas items and things that they have going on with their family every year.
Yeah, I couldn't be farther away because until you started mentioning it today, it was not on my mind. But I'm glad you did, because one of the things I didn't mention earlier, traditions, is we go to church. It's a religious holiday.
It's the reason for the season, as they say, Matthew.
It is actually what Christmas is about. I bet you there's a shocking percentage of Americans who've never really even heard what it's actually about, as crazy as that sounds. And there's never a bad time to start going to church. So we go to Mass, of course, on Christmas, and that's
yeah, we are usually a Christmas Eve family. I don't know about you, but yeah, that's one of the things we usually try and get in there. But
yes,
I think it's important, though, Delano's point of you can have differences, enjoy your time with your family, but then also what Josh Hammer, what we had him on for with the transgender issue with United States versus Scrimeti, and trying to see, can you trans the kids legally in this country or not? There is a point which you must not cross, if we're going to quote Ronald Reagan again one more time, because you did say we can't be citizens with these type of people. Now, it's interesting to go back and forth on that with Delano and Josh Hammer today.
Look, beyond any sort of political affiliation, your family is your family. So you would want to love them more than anyone else except for God, right? I mean, so religious holidays all come from religion, by the way. That's the basis of what establishes them. And then underneath that, you have
Just not the fake ones like Kwanzaa.
The family, and then and then you have the political regime. So how do they all work together? And in the case of the Supreme Court now, I mean, this is just so evil. Like, I mean, this is to use the modern vernacular, I mean, this is like Nazi level stuff, right? I mean, except they didn't even do this, I don't think, to go and mutilate the genitals of kids, to tell little kids that they confuse them about their gender. This is not something that should have to be argued. This is something where if you really disagree about this as a society over a long period of time, you just can't live together. You can't have your kids go to a school where people are, wanting to trans them and saying it's okay, and then taking them away from you and giving them chemicals and mutilating them. You can't do this, right? And I don't want it to be that way, right? I'd like us to all get along, but this is just reality. So if you disagree on this fundamental stuff, over time, no, you will lose the very basis for citizenship and the very basis for unity around the table. So let me counter something about the politics of the table real quick during the holiday season. They're not wrong. Like their religion, right? It makes it so they can't really break bread with their relatives who disagree with them on these fundamental issues. And that actually, for some of this stuff, isn't crazy, because it's like you and I disagreeing about the most important things in the world, right? We have to find some place that we agree on. So these are deep waters.
These are deep waters, and California out there had some tsunami threats earlier today. They had a 0.7 earthquake out there, and thankfully they're not going to be under deep water, but they are still very, very blue out there. And we had Tom Sauer on with us at the top of the show, and it's just interesting to see this little red dot there still in California trying to hold on. And of course, anytime that elections take a month to count, they always end one way.
Right. But so they need to stop. I mean, obviously, with the slow rolling the count, we can't know how many people just voted total in the election for months and months until California count. This is crazy. Absolutely crazy. But this conversation reminds me why I left, right? And the problem is that it's more than a red dot, to be fair. I mean, California has, most of California, right, just by land, is red. It's a bunch of red counties, just like everywhere else. As soon as you get, an hour from the coast, and everyone there, they're voting for Trump majority, right? But the population centers, right, are obviously very blue. And even in the population centers, you do have this red dot in Orange County, where you have a lot of conservatives and wealthy conservative donors, as sort of ATM for the Republican Party nationally still. And what Tom pointed out was, I mean, it's music to my ears, because maybe they're finally getting it, but they weren't willing to fight. Honestly, I left California in large part because I would just go to them and say, like, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? And you just see they're like, oh, kid, get out of here, for 20 years. And after a while you go, well, I can't live here anymore because look at what's going on. It's literally falling apart around me. Okay, to hell with you. Bye. I'm going to go to a place where I can actually move things forward, which you can in Texas.
Yeah.
So anyway, if they start getting mad and start, fighting harder, great.
You tried out there, you pulled your hair out, and look at it now. Now this is just
I pulled a lot of hair out. I really did.
This is it. But you know what? There's at least some hope here in Texas still, and there's some hope in Tennessee as well. So you know what? Keep the red states red. Keep Christmas spirit alive. Things are going to get better as we get closer to Christmas. And don't forget to subscribe to Blaze News Tonight on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll see you back here tomorrow night.